It's time for Fresh Oil with singer-songwriter and pastor Keith Manley, a program designed to minister the gospel of God's grace and to bring fresh oil to the brokenhearted. And now, with today's program, Pastor Keith Manley.
Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Fresh Oil. It's day 2 of our 5-day series that I'm teaching called From Pit to Palace, the Joseph Journey. And today we're tackling one of the most painful topics in all of the human experience, and that's betrayal. Surviving when those closest hurt you the most. Now, yesterday we saw Joseph receive a dream from God, and it was a vision of his future that seemed impossible. And today we're going to see the dream nearly destroyed by the people who should have protected him the most, and that's his own brothers. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been hurt by family or close friends, if you've ever even wondered how to survive when those closest to you become your greatest enemies, this episode is for you. Because Joseph's story teaches us that betrayal doesn't disqualify you from your destiny. In fact, sometimes betrayal is the very thing that positions you for your purpose. Let's pick up where we left off in Genesis 37 and verse 12. It tells us that Joseph's brothers had taken their father's flocks to graze near Shechem. It's about 50 miles from their home. And Jacob sends Joseph to check on them. Now this is significant. Joseph is 17 years old, and he's being sent on a multi-day journey to find his brothers. This shows that despite the family tension, Jacob still trusted Joseph and still expected the brothers to receive him. But Jacob had no idea what was brewing in his sons' hearts. In Genesis 37, verse 18, it said, "But when they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes the dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him, and then we'll see what comes of his dreams." Let that sink in. They saw him in a distance, their own brother, and immediately began plotting his murder. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. They had time to think about it. They had time to reconsider, but their hatred was so deep, their jealousy so intense that they wanted him dead. And notice their mocking words. Here comes that dreamer. They're ridiculing his God-given vision. They're mocking what God showed them. Then they say, "Let's kill him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." See, they thought they could kill the dream by killing the dreamer. They thought they could stop God's plan by stopping Joseph. But here's the truth, friend, you need to understand. You cannot kill a God-given dream. You can delay it, but you can't destroy it. Reuben, the oldest brother, he intervenes. In verse 21, it said, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So they compromise. Instead of killing Joseph, they'll throw him in a pit, a dry cistern about 20 to 30 feet deep with steep walls. It was essentially a death sentence, just slower. And in Genesis 37, verse 23, it says, "So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it." Now, why does it point that out? Because that means it was painful when he fell in and he hit the concrete floor. Imagine this moment. Joseph arrives, probably excited to see his brothers, probably bringing news from home, and they attack him. They strip off his robe, the symbol of his father's love, the symbol of his special status, and they throw him into a dark pit. And then, this is chilling, verse 25, as they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelite traders coming from Gilead. Now, I'm a fanatic on the sovereignty of God. I believe God plans our steps out. He orders our steps of the righteous. God knew exactly who was coming. They sat down to eat while their brothers brother was in the pit, and they were so callous, so hardened, they could enjoy a meal while Joseph was crying out for help, maybe even had a broken bone from the fall. Judah then suggests that they sell Joseph as a slave instead of leaving him to die. Verse 27, verse 28, "Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern, and they sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. Now, what I found when I studied the life of Joseph is there's so many parallels between the life of Joseph and the life of Jesus. Jesus was sold by his close disciple Judas for 30 pieces of silver. Here Joseph is sold for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, and they took him to Egypt. 20 shekels of silver, that was the price of a slave. And Joseph's own brothers sold him for the price of a slave. They took his robe, they killed a goat, they dipped the robe in blood and brought it back to their father, letting him believe that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. In Genesis 37, verse 34 said, "Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. 'No,' he said, 'I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave.' So his father wept for him." Now the brothers who betrayed Joseph had to watch their father grieve for years, knowing they were responsible. They had to live with that lie, that guilt, that secret. Now let's talk about betrayal, because Joseph's experience teaches us some profound truths about surviving when those closest hurt you the most. Here's truth one. Betrayal often comes from those who are closest to you. Joseph wasn't betrayed by strangers. He was betrayed by his brothers, people who shared his blood, his home, his history, people who should have protected him. This is the deepest kind of pain, I believe, that people can experience. When a stranger hurts you, it's painful. But when family hurts you, when a close friend betrays you, when someone you trusted turns against you, friend, it cuts you to the core. Jesus experienced this. Judas, one of his 12 disciples, betrayed him with a kiss. Peter, his closest friend, denied him 3 times. His disciples abandoned him in his darkest hour. Psalm 55, 12 through 14 captures that pain. It says, "If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were rising against me, I could hide. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship at the house of God as we walked about among the worshipers." My friend, if you've been betrayed by someone close, know that you're not alone. Jesus understands. Joseph understands, and God sees your pain. Here's the second truth. Betrayal is often rooted in jealousy. Joseph's brothers betrayed him because they were jealous. They resented his father's favoritism. They envied his dreams. They couldn't stand the thought of one day him being elevated above them and them bowing down to him. Jealousy is a poison that destroys relationships. Proverbs 27:4 says, "Anger is cruel and fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy?" My friend, when people betray you, it's often not really about you. It's about what you represent. Your success threatens their ego, and your blessing, it highlights their lack. Your favor exposes their insecurity. Don't take it personally. Their betrayal reveals their character, not your worth. Don't accept it. Truth 3, betrayal can actually position you for purpose. Now this you need to get. Here's the paradox. The very thing that seemed designed to destroy Joseph's dream actually positioned him to fulfill it. If his brothers hadn't sold him to Egypt, he would have never ended up in Potiphar's house. And if he hadn't been in Potiphar's house, he never would have ended up in prison. And if he hadn't been in prison, he never would have met Pharaoh's cupbearer. And if he hadn't met the cupbearer, he never would have been brought before Pharaoh. And if he hadn't been brought before Pharaoh, he never would have become second in command of Egypt. Pharaoh named him Zapnath-Paneah, and it meant Savior of the world. Once again, Jesus began his ministry at age 30. Joseph began his ministry as Savior of the world at 30 years old. The betrayal was the first step toward the palace. See, Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." See, God can take the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and he can use it for your greatest good. The pit is not your end, it's your beginning. And there finally, betrayal reveals who you really are. Joseph's response to betrayal is remarkable. He didn't become bitter. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't sit around thinking of how he could kill his brothers. He didn't give up on God or on people. In every season that followed, as a slave, as a prisoner, Joseph maintained his integrity, his faith, and his character. That betrayal didn't define him. His response to the betrayal defined him. How you respond to betrayal reveals your character. Will you become bitter or better? Will you seek revenge or trust God's justice? Will you close your heart or will you keep it open? Your response will determine your future. Now let me wind this up today. Joseph was thrown in prison. He was sold as a slave. He was separated from his father. He had every right to grieve, to be angry, to feel pain. And you do too. Don't spiritualize your pain. Don't pretend it doesn't hurt. Don't rush through the grieving process, but don't camp in the pit either. Feel the pain, process it, bring it to God, but don't let it become your permanent residence. Psalm 30 verse 5 says, "Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning." And then, friend, refuse to become what hurt you. Joseph's brothers were cruel, vindictive, and deceptive, but Joseph didn't become like them. He didn't let their betrayal turn him into a betrayer. And then just trust God, his justice and not your own. Joseph didn't plot revenge. He didn't scheme to get back at his brothers. He trusted God to handle it. Then just keep serving faithfully. Look for God's purpose in the pain. Now let me close today with this encouragement. The pit is not your end. It's not your destination. It's just a stop on the journey to your purpose. Joseph was in the pit, but he didn't stay there. He was sold as a slave, but he didn't stay a slave. He was thrown in prison, but he didn't stay in prison. Every pit has a purpose. Every betrayal has a redemption. Every setback is a setup for a comeback. If you're in a pit right now, if you're being betrayed, hurt, and abandoned, my friend, I want you to know this is not the end of your story. God is writing a redemption story for you, and he's turning your mess into a message. He's turning your test into a testimony. Hold on. Keep believing and keep trusting. The palace is coming. Friends, betrayal is painful, but it's not fatal. Joseph survived it, and so will you. God is with you in the pit, and he's going to bring you out.
What does it look like to give your life not to fame, but to faithfulness? In I Wish You Jesus, author Keith Manley tells the powerful, deeply human story of Scott Wesley Brown, one of the most influential voices in contemporary Christian music, whose legacy has always pointed beyond the stage and toward the Savior. From humble beginnings and early musical stirrings, through decades of songwriting, global ministry, and personal sacrifice, this biography traces the journey of a man who chose obedience over applause and mission over spotlight. Brown's songs shaped a generation of worshipers, but his greatest message was never confined to lyrics. It was lived out through faith.
Check out my new book, I Wish You Jesus, The Life and Music of Scott Wesley Brown. It's available now on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, or the Kindle ebook edition.
Thanks for joining us today for Fresh Oil with Pastor Keith Manley. Fresh Oil is an outreach of Grace Family Church in Rockford, Illinois, and can be heard each weekday at this same time. You can reach us online at weneedgod.com. Until next time, remember, God's love for you is unconditional, and He makes His mercies new every morning.